Professor Mike. Professor Mike, the mic with you. Professor Mike, he will taking chairing sessions for keynote speaking session Horizon 1. He will be the chairing the sessions and he will present all the presenters. Go ahead, Professor Mike, the mic with you.
Okay, thank you, Hanadi, and thanks for inviting me. And again, thank you for putting together, I believe this is the third year we've been doing this, and you're put together another wonderful conference. Provides a wealth of knowledge and information for everybody. It's a marvelous thing you're doing. Okay, I think we were scheduled for 3 keynote speakers. It's my understanding that Jonathan Lodge is not going to be able to make it. Is that right, Hanadi?
Yes, please. Yeah. And Beverly will taking place, and the new presenter will come and taking the Beverly place.
Okay, so the first one is my dear friend, Dr. Beverly Anderson. So I see she's online and smiling. So I'll ask her to
welcome, Beverly. Welcome, Professor Beverly.
There you go.
Okay. My entire professional life has been focused on various aspects of business. For many years, I was a professor. I taught, researched, wrote, and consulted on business topics. When I retired from full-time teaching, I decided to embark on a new area of study, that of Western philosophy. 3 years ago, I enrolled at a 4-year program at the University of Chicago in liberal studies. I am now in the 4th year of that program. And the presentation today is the result of an attempt to integrate my recent philosophical learnings with my previous understanding of innovation. So it's a rather offbeat presentation. I will begin with a quote from a well-known American serial entrepreneur, Roger Ailes. He said, "True innovation lies not only in looking to the future, but in understanding the past." So let us look to the past, the beginning of innovation. Early in my University of Chicago program, a course included the readings from Aristotle's Physics. One statement in those readings really resonated with me. That is, nothing comes from nothing. Everything comes from something. What is the something from which innovations come? Where do they come from? I concluded it must come from some idea. Someone has to have an idea to begin an innovation. And we studied Descartes, and Descartes said that ideas cannot arise from nothingness. An idea is the result or the effect of a cause. Well, what on the earth is the cause of ideas? Where do they come from? Well, Descartes gave us a theory that one idea may give birth to another idea. But then the question is, what is the source of the first idea? Is there something else that exists? What comes first, the chicken or the egg, as the saying goes? Descartes went on to theorize that ideas could come from 3 bases. One was external sources. Second was that it is innate within us. Within us, we're born with it. Or 3, that our mind is able to generate new ideas by itself. Now, looking at these 3 different ways, he said from external sources, it would be something that we would perceive through our senses. We'd see something and it triggered an ideas in our mind. We heard something. Maybe some of you will hear something in this presentation that will trigger an idea. There's light, sound, colors, but these are different things, some of them from nature, some of them not from nature, that give us an idea that we're that is the genesis of an innovation. Now, the second possibility, according to Descartes, was that it was internal. We were born with this knowledge. Now, Socrates thought that the soul was immortal. He felt everyone had a soul, and that the soul had learned everything. Nothing prevents man from recalling. And later on, Descartes even said, when I discovered things for the first time, it does not seem as though I were learning anything new, but rather as though I were remembering what I had previously known. Now, what put that in us? We aren't sure. Maybe something divine. The third idea, the third idea is the starting point invented by self. And this requires that the individual is a genius. They come up with something new, very original on their own. Ways of thought that are so intricate, according to John Henry Newman, that they're almost beyond our understanding. Now, there are some other places that we may get ideas from. If you read the Old Testament, in a book of Ezekiel, he got the idea for the wheel from a vision he had. Now, I personally have never had a vision. Maybe some of you have. I haven't. So I can't really speak too much about the visions. Now, there was Einstein had what he referred to as thought experiments. Now, this is really, some people said he almost went into a trance. It was a form of meditation. And one of the things he said, he got most of his ideas from when he was in some form of meditation. His E equals MC squared. One of the quotes by Einstein that I'd come across I really like: logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. I love that quote. Then I have down here Zen mindful meditation. That was what Steve Jobs used. He meditated every morning for an hour before he went to work. And he said this is where his ideas for all of the innovations that he had came from, through his Zen meditation. But we do know that not everyone thinks the same way. For example, a recent book by Temple Grandin that came out this year, the book's called Visual Thinkers, says that some people are verbal thinkers, think sequentially from A to B to C. Some people are visual thinkers, but even visual thinkers, some people think in terms of objects. I have a dispenser here. You may think of a machine or an object, and you may see some object. But other people who are visual thinkers think in terms of spatial. They think of networks, systems, ecosystems, how everything works together. They have a broader macro view of their way of thinking. 100 years ago, in 1922, there was an article in the Political Science Journal by Augman and Thomas that said there were really two factors in developing innovations. One was the mental ability of humans, that we've already discussed, the ideas, where it comes from. But they said that there was also the existing status of social and material culture. For example, they said you couldn't have invented the steamboat unless someone had invented the boat previously. So many of our innovations today rely on technology which has been previously developed. What is the state of our technology? What is the state of our material culture? But also society. Are we ready for this kind of innovation? Some things come, we say, before their times, that they were too fast, that society wasn't able to accept it. So therefore, they said that you have to consider both the human element, the mental ability, and the social and material culture. Now, if we assume the world stays the same, there would only be one starting point for an innovation. But we do know that our world is in constant motion. And this was one of the things that Aristotle talked about. Things are constantly in motion, and so therefore there are multiple starting points of ideas. These multiple starting points mean that more than one person may come up with the same idea. We have many examples of simultaneous innovations, and I just have a few here. Calculus came up with both Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz in the 1600s. The theory of natural selection, both Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace in the 1800s. The bank automated teller machines by a UK citizen, John Shepard Barron, and Don Wetzel in the US in the 1960s. Both came up with this idea. Then we have Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin, who came up both different starting points, but they innovated a way for a polio vaccine. And recently, in the past couple of years, we have seen the different pharmaceutical firms come up with different vaccines to fight COVID. They've all had different starting points to come up with these new and interesting ideas. Aristotle said that you have to have the essence of a starting base, and that may be from nature or not from nature. In other words, you can take a machine, you can take something and improve upon it. But it has to start from some form of matter. And he said there were only three things you could do with this matter. You could either add to or increase it and enlarge it, or you could decrease, take away from it, or you could alter its basic characteristics. Those are the only three things that you can do to matter if you're going to innovate or create something new. I have an example here of Apple Corporation. This is increasing inside. In 2010, Apple Corporation took the iPhone and came up with, by expanding it, the iPad. This is an example of increasing in size, adding to. They also used to decrease. They had the iBook portable that they shrunk down and made the clamshell. This is an example of shrinking it. They made it smaller and easier to handle. Then you have an example of altering the basic characteristics. And what I'm using here as an example, there are many others, but they went from the Macintosh desktop computer to the iBook laptop computer. This was going from a desktop to a laptop. They altered the basic characteristics. Now, one of the things we do know, you can have a combination. You can alter characteristics and make it larger, et cetera. But you have to have some process to do this. This will take an iterative process of trial and error, as we know. Anytime someone is trying to create something new, there's going to be trial and error. My favorite example of that is Bentley in the UK. In 1913, he had his automobile, but he wanted to make it go faster. He had a major problem, though. The engine was too heavy for the automobile to go much faster. And he was trying to figure out how he could make the engine lighter. Now, the major source of weight in the engine were the pistons. And he couldn't figure out how to make the pistons lighter. And then he became acquainted with aluminum. And he thought this would be a great thing to use. But there was one problem. Aluminum melts at a very low temperature. So therefore, it wouldn't work in an engine in an automobile because it'd probably melt. So through trial and error, he tried aluminum with many other elements. And through many trials and error, he came up with the right combination of copper added to the aluminum, which allowed it to function at a higher temperature. And this then allowed the pistons for the automobile to go faster. But just at that time, he switched to helicopters. So the pistons then went into helicopters rather than his automobile. Now, Aristotle says you have to also consider, for the sake of, why are you inventing something? Why are you having an innovation? What's the purpose of your innovation? And this is one of the things we know with all innovations. It has to have some value added or there's no sense doing it. And there's various things that could happen. Is it for nature? Is it more sustainable? For health, is it going to prolong life? Is it going to cure a disease? Is it going to bring humans more enjoyment, entertainment? Is it going to be more efficient, more effective? Is it going to have lower costs? What is going to be the progress that they will attribute to the innovation you are attempting to have? And this is one of the things you have to figure out, the purpose of the value added. Is it going to have value added to the consumers? Now, we do know there are a lot of unintentional innovations. This is a coincidental clause, according to Aristotle, when you're trying for one thing and you end up creating something else. And I think the best example I have of that is Dr. Spencer Silver, who tried to develop the super strong adhesive for 3M company and ended up creating the low-tack, now known as our Post-it notes, which are so successful. Now, was this luck or chance? According to Aristotle, this would have been luck. He said that luck is when you're trying for something and it turns out to come successful. That is what luck is. It's a result of a deliberate choice. Is this a divine thing? It's bad luck if it doesn't turn out well, but good luck if it does. He differentiated that from chance, which is a coincidental cause, but you weren't trying for anything. It just happened. And I have the example here of Newton sitting under the tree. He wasn't trying for anything. All he was trying to do was maybe take a nap, and the apple fell on his head, and it gave him the idea of gravity. Now, how are we going to put all this together? Now, this is one of the things that we have is that you've got to put your ideas together, the kernel of the idea, where the idea came from. You're going to have to go through trial and error. You're going to have to figure out the purpose of it. You're going to have to put this all together to create a viable innovation. Now, John Henry Newman came up with a term, illative sense, that he described this unconscious process of the mind, how we put it all together, that the mind seems to be able to get it all together to create an innovation through inference and assent and knowledge. And this is one of the things that he created the term for, because he couldn't figure out anything. He said it was a mystery. Now, what's the future of innovations and entrepreneurial systems? We've talked about the past. I've went way, way back to the past. What is going to be the future of innovations and ecosystems? Let's look at the innovators and entrepreneurs. Today, the Earth has 3 times as many people as it did in 1950. This means that there are most likely 3 times as many geniuses out there. Logically, we will have approximately 3 times as many innovators creating new opportunities for entrepreneurs. Will thinking be expanded? Will more individuals engage in visual thinking through the practice of meditation and other mind-enhancing activities? We really don't know about that, but it's becoming more popular. Artificial intelligence aided innovations. AI is particularly adept at the iterative processes. AI can go through iterations much faster than any human. In addition, AI can quickly gain knowledge that may be useful to human innovators. AI-independent innovations are also possible. According to reports in 2017, AI bots at Facebook created their own language for communication between themselves. In the future, it is possible that AI bots will be able to better scan the environment and develop new ways to face the world's many challenges. What about the social and mental culture, the ecosystem? The rate of technology innovations has increased exponentially for the past 100 years. In the future, the predictions are that technological change will accelerate at an even faster pace. There are some concerns that social culture, which moves at a somewhat slower pace, will not be able to competently adapt and use the rapid advances in technology. What we know for sure, though, is that the universe is in constant motion. Change is inevitable. The environment will change. Humans will change. There will be vast opportunities for innovation and ways to adapt to this new and ever-changing world. I'd like to thank the many great philosophers that I've been studying at the University of Chicago for the past 3 years: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Newman, and others. I also would like to thank Hannadi for allowing me to giving me an opportunity to give a rather offbeat presentation on innovation. And I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation. And perhaps something I said or some idea came to you during the presentation that will give you a basis for creating something new and different in your own innovation. Thank you all for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Beverly. I thought that was excellent. And, you know, I've always been a big proponent of education as a lifelong process. The fact that you had such a distinguished career in teaching and research, and I've listened to a lot of your research presentations, and then you went on to continue your education. I think it's just marvelous, and it's a wonderful example for other people. Good for you, Beverly.
Lifelong learning is very, very important. It really is.
Yes, yes, it is. I try to emphasize that to my students, and they sort of figure, well, when I get done out of here, I don't have to worry about this anymore. But I keep telling them education is indeed a lifelong process, and you never stop learning. I try to learn something new every day, I tell them, so we can continue. Thanks again. Okay, the next keynote speaker, Dr. Harvey Kesselman. He's the president of Stockton University. And as most of you know, higher education is going through a number of challenges today, and it's yet to be seen what happens in the future. One is the use of technology. I think because of COVID, technology had to be used a lot more, and we'll see how that impacts further into higher education. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Harvey Kesselman to the conference.
Well, hello. Am I on?
You're on.
There you go. Hello, Beverly. It's very difficult to follow Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and the like, but I'll see what I can do. I'm going to look at this topic a little bit from a slightly different perspective, that of a university president, how many of the tools that are currently available to us are used on literally a day-to-day basis, and the way maybe a chief executive officer of a university looks at the world, particularly post-COVID and what we've just gone through. And so if we're looking at my agenda today, I'm just going to talk particularly 20 minutes. When you ask a president, you limit that person to 20 minutes. I have three areas. We can, our introduction usually goes 20 minutes, but we have 3 areas that we're going to look at: data, the whole issue of data; 2, leadership opportunities and adaptive leadership; and then remote learning and work, which of course is a topic not only in higher education, but in virtually every industry across the world. Data governance. Let's start with data. And I think this is really significant because of the amount of data that we have available to us that, as recently as maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we did not. And so one of the objectives of a university president or provost or dean and the like would at least begin to understand the protocols regarding who owns the data, how is it to be used, how is it to be stored, most importantly, and particularly now, how it's to be protected, and then for how long do you keep data? All of these things matter. And I can provide some examples, which I will later on, of the kind of data that we have at our fingertips that we didn't before, and that we certainly wouldn't want the rest of the world to have available to them. So to put that aside for a moment until we get to the more detail on that. But data governance is a critical issue on college and university campuses throughout the world. And the second thing, of course, is with data governance comes data literacy. And that is, how do you analyze data? How do you understand it correctly? Because it's very, very easy to misinterpret information. I think we see that all the time. I mean, we've gone through eras of fake news and everything associated with what that means and how that comes about. The incorrect assumptions that we can sometimes make because we have a wealth of data available to us, but we don't go through it at the level of detail that you may need to go through it. And as a result, sometimes we reach inaccurate conclusions. I think we saw a lot of that during the COVID era. And then certain data points actually hold more weight for us, certainly as individuals responsible for colleges and universities, than other data. In other words, all data are not equal. 4 types of data, and let me give you an example before I go to this on the last one, and that's data literacy. One of the things that I try to do, particularly that last point, certain data points hold more weight than others. On an biannual basis, I do it both in the fall term and in the spring term. When I hold, large group meetings with literally our entire faculty and staff to review important data for the health and vitality of the institution, as well as to try to portray pictorially for folks what the trends are in higher education. Because I think it's important, not only do we we are aware of what's going on in our own institutions, but beyond that. I think sometimes, particularly, when we get so focused into our discipline that we lose sight of what's going on beyond our discipline. And that's one of the things I try to do by presenting data in pretty easy formats. But I don't show every piece of data we have. I show what I believe are the most important pieces. That's one point I wanted to bring up. But let's take a look at 4 types of data analytics. And now with the availability of software that allows us to go through these simulations and the like, it becomes a lot easier to look at data this way. So I'm going to lay out 4 different types of data. Descriptive data, which if we were to put it in, terms such as, here's what happened. Okay, we describe exactly what's happened, whatever that may be, and I'll give you an illustration. Diagnostic data, why did it happen? Predictive, what might happen in the future? And prescriptive, what should we do next? Descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. All 4 of those areas are how one can look at data. And I'm sure there are more, but they're the 4 brackets that we try to do at Stockton, and certainly the Stockton administration does. And I didn't talk to you about that, what Stockton is, a university, approximately 10,000 students, 3,000 residential students in southeastern New Jersey. It's on a 1,600-acre campus in the middle of the Pinelands National Reserve. I call it the garden part of the Garden State in New Jersey. But we also have a campus in Atlantic City, an urban campus, which is a very different kind of an environment. So we have a multi-campus university in southeastern New Jersey. Michael Busler, who happens to be a great faculty member there, and I appreciate his insight. That's why I'm here today, as a result of him and several of our business faculty, who I hope are listening. You're not getting graded, so if you're not listening, that's okay. You'll be forgiven. But to go back to these 4 things, let's go there. If you look at it on this sort of chart we pulled together, like value, Bob DiMaggio actually, versus difficulty, the hindsight are your descriptive analytics and your diagnostic analytics. And if you looked at the history of higher ed and how we present data, both internally and externally, and how many of the entities that evaluate us and rank us and the like, that's how they're looking at us. What happened? Why did it happen? From a hindsight point of view. And there are many leaders that's how they do their job. They want to know what happened, why did it happen, and then they let others figure out, so what do we do from here? And that's where you get into the other 2. What might happen in the future, your foresight in the future? How do we use that data to be able to predict with some degree of accuracy, because there's not 100% accuracy. And then what should we do next? Prescriptive. Once we know what might happen, if we believe this may happen in the future, okay, then what should we do next to be prepared for it? Obviously, none of us were as prepared as we ought to have been when COVID hit us. But had we thought about that, and there are always signals that these things happen, it's something that has recurred over and over again in history, okay, yet we weren't ready for it. And as a result, not only did colleges and universities shut down, whole states shut down, almost the entire country shut down, because we weren't able to accurately predict it, or we chose not to predict it. We didn't look at the data signs. And then we didn't, what should we do next? So we were all running around trying to figure out what you should do next. And if this is that one lesson COVID taught us, is never to put ourselves in that position again. and always be prepared for the unexpected. So I think that's really, really important when you're dealing with data. And let me give you like a more micro kind of thing that, let's say, an enrollment management person on your campus is responsible for. So they're going to look at data analytics this way. Here's what happened. And this year, and I'm proud to say this was us actually, our first time enrollment this year increased 15% as compared to last year. Last year was, remember, year 2 of COVID. It wasn't the first term of COVID. Now, why did it happen? So we look at that diagnosis. Well, we had a 25% increase in campus visitations. Why? Because the year before and the year before that, less people were likely to visit the campus as a result of COVID. And so they didn't come here. And that resulted, we believe, we're not saying it's causal, but there's certainly a correlation, okay, and a 50% increase in applications. So that's when we diagnosed, that's what happened after we described that our enrollment, where the enrollment situation is. Now, what might happen in the future? How do we use that information to guide the actions of our enrollment management office and the actions of the institution to ensure that we have students in the future? Well, one of the things, if this is accurate, and even if it's not causality, we can't prove causality, we can certainly look at the correlation. We can say students who visit campus seem to be more likely to apply, more likely to deposit, and more likely to enroll. So what's the prescriptive, point that follows? What should we do next? Then hold more on-campus events to supplement more daily tours and open houses. Faculty-led seminars are terrific for that. Financial aid workshops, get people to our campus. That focus, that works well for an institution like Stockton. You was talking about University of Chicago. They get tens of thousands of applications for very selective seats, but most colleges and universities are not the University of Chicago or Harvard or Princeton or Penn, and they have to look at these kinds of data in order to gauge their next year's first time in transfer classes. Cybersecurity. This is as a president. Okay, I cannot overstate, and I can show you how powerful this is, how important cybersecurity is now. I think Microsoft stated in 2021, so this is current, education is one of the most threatened industries. And I can give you a zillion reasons why not. I will give you some. Malware, phishing attacks, more persistent now and advanced than ever. I think we're seeing it. I think in last night alone, I had 3 text messages that were all phishing attempts from Amazon or some other entity saying, if I don't link in, I'm going to lose, my rights to Amazon and the like. That's serious, because the weakest link in cybersecurity right now is human behavior, because we're the ones that make the click. We're the ones that allow them into our systems. So what we're doing at Stockton and many colleges and universities, and let me tell you how scary this is we utilize artificial intelligence to correlate cybersecurity threats into our technology landscape. So we're using AI to show threats, so we know how people react to those threats. And that is critical. So you need what? Strong IT, security team, ongoing communication, training for everyone on your campus, well-tested and well-documented. To put this in perspective of how important this is on a college or university campus, when COVID hit, even though we all shut down, we could still continue the teaching, learning process because of our technology. So even though it was a perfect scenario, we still could conduct business in some way because of technology. However, if our systems crash right now, okay, that will not hold true. We need technology to function. So as traumatic of an experience as COVID was, imagine if we had no access to our technology, which is what happened, of course, during Katrina in New Orleans, but we're 10 times, 100 times, maybe even 1,000 times more relying on technology now than we were then. So I can't overstate, when you go back to your campuses, if you're not involved in the cybersecurity aspect of your institutions, please, okay, take some time, talk to your security people, talk to one another, because it is a huge problem on college and university campuses, and human error is the way. And keep in mind what we have in our systems now. We not only have student demographic data, but we have everyone's demographic data. So if you can get into our system, okay, you can find out everything about not only every student at the institution, but every employee at the institution. And that's very, very private data, because we're all within, we're not on the old Excel spreadsheets, it's stored somewhere in human resources. We're all in the same platform. And if you get into it, you've gotten into people's lives. And that is a very, very scary kind of thing. And I don't mean to get you like all crazed, but I do want you to, the antennas should go up so that you know the kinds of threats that we think about on a college or university campus. Now, let me switch gears a little bit and go to leadership and go back a little bit to what we talked about before. And that is the past, the present, and the future. And Beverly did a great scenario of that in her presentation, where she showed the evolution of innovation and how you go the past, the present, and the future. So let's look at from an oversight. Most presidents are locked into this. I'm going to be telling you right now. We're locked in the analytical view of how we look at things. We look at review key data. Do we meet our enrollment targets? Do we meet our financial targets? Those kinds of things. If there's a lot of yeses out there, we're happy. We move on. We go out to dinner that night. All right, and we're not thinking a lot further than that. But we have to begin to think further than that. We have to do it because things change so rapidly, and because of all the different scenarios that we're faced with. So, for example, now I would argue that the present is stewardship, where we've become a bit more inquisitive. If COVID didn't teach us that, it hasn't taught us anything to be more inquisitive. How do we use this information that we now have reviewed to strategize? How do we think about things, not just now, but setting us up for the future? Are students learning what they need to learn? This is something we talk about. This is something we say, but how deep? And we're all in this business. How many of us can absolutely say with, certainty that our students are learning what they need to learn for the future? I know they're learning what we're presenting to them, but are they learning what they need to learn? And how do we go about acquiring that kind of information? And then, of course, are students progressing at the rate that we would like them to progress? And then finally, the future, the strategic view, which is exploratory, which is adapting to the unknown, trying to determine the unintended consequences of our actions. Okay, how do we begin to guesstimate? How do we begin to think about what will happen in the future? How the mergers and acquisitions, which are now happening in higher education, will that affect my institution? Will that affect our sister institutions and the like? And what role will technology play in higher education 5 years from now? Not today, but 5 years from now. And do we ask ourselves this question: what might happen to our institution if X occurs? And we've got to continually do that, because we never know. In a state environment, if you're funded by the government, what happens? I mean, the system of Pennsylvania, where appropriations began to decrease rapidly, enrollments began to decrease rapidly. So some schools were forced to merge and things of that nature. So we always need to look what happens in the future. One of the things I do with my cabinet all the time is I think I only have 5 minutes. I told you, if I can get this done in 20 minutes, it'd be a miracle. All right, is the past, the present, and the future. And how much time, and I ask my cabinet to do this, how much time do we spend in each? Okay, and I want you to take this with you, take a snapshot and do it yourself. And how much time do you spend in each of these views? And what I try to get is 20% on the past. So we use that, we need it, we need to look at it. 40% to be inquisitive on the present, but also at least 40% of our time now, when we're meeting with our cabinets during our retreats, are spending looking at the future. So I think it's important that when you analyze whether you're doing it at how you're doing your home budget to how you're doing your work-life balance. If you're looking at all of these things, I think you should see how you would fit and what percentages would apply to you and your university. Leadership opportunities. Some of the things we know that technology will do: virtual reality training and simulation, foreign language conversations with avatars and computer generated, restaurants and things of that nature. The education practitioners interacting with simulated school children. Look what we can do in our teacher preparation programs. Just sitting in a classroom with simulated responses by children. And then, of course, patient simulation for healthcare, which a lot of us had to do when, in fact, we were going through COVID and, our healthcare providers were shut down. Having artificial intelligence teaching assistants and machine learning chatbots and the like. These opportunities require substantial investments in equipment, knowledge, training, and technical implementation and support. But the real question is, once we do all this, we have to go back to that question I raised a little bit earlier, and that, does it improve learning outcomes? And do we know whether it's doing what we want it to do? And I think if you can be centered around what you believe is your mission, whether it's a University of Chicago has a significant research mission, okay? I mean, they're to create new knowledges in the field. Regional comprehensive universities like Stockton are really focused on student access and success because we have a lot of students who are, quote, can come, underrepresented students who have not come from the best high schools that we have to bring into our institutions. We covet them, but we have an obligation to ensure they have every opportunity to succeed. Students, however, want more choices now regarding content and delivery. It's out of necessity, because many of the new students had 2 years of this in high school, and so they've been accustomed to online education, so they want to see. And this scares me. I'm 71. Okay, I like face to face. It gives me enthusiasm. I worry when I have to see fully online degree programs, certificate programs, and training credentials. And I know there's a convenience factor there, but I don't think I can be as effective. That doesn't mean we can't be. It's just one of my hangups. And we have to all, analyze ourselves to see where we sit in this. We must continue to explore new teaching and learning strategies throughout, utilizing the most up-to-date technologies. And the students, all of our students, must have access to these resources and services that they need. Okay. And that doesn't always happen equally in our society. And I think most people know that. And the quality of academics and customer service should never decline if you're moving to a more online environment. Finally, everything can be successful if it's centered around your mission. If you try to do more than who you are, okay, then you usually don't succeed. And we need employees too now, want more flexibility. There's more of a demand for work-life balance and being involved and more engaged in what's going on in your life. But we still must be effective in delivering customer service to our students. And we also need to adapt to all of the new technologies out there, not just one, because they can be swallowed and changed overnight. And I'm done. So did I do it in 20 minutes? I can't hear you, Michael. You're on mute. Michael, you're on mute.
All right, how's that?
Okay.
Good. You did very well, Harvey. Thank you very much. That was very informative, I think, for everyone. We did have a speaker that got ill, so we do have some extra time. So you certainly didn't run over, and we thank you so much for that. I wonder if I could ask you a question that some people may find interesting also. There are a number of high school graduates who feel more comfortable at a much smaller school. Because some of these smaller schools with fairly low enrollments are able to give them the kind of attention that they want. And some have been very successful starting out at smaller schools. The problem is with all the issues that you highlighted as going forward, a lot of these smaller schools are having trouble just making it. You mentioned in Pennsylvania with the reduction in funding, some schools had to merge. I know here in New Jersey, it was Bloomfield College was taken over by Montclair. So I think you're going to see more of that happening in the future. And what my question was, how do you see these smaller schools in the future? You think they'll be able to survive, or you think we're going to see a lot more of these mergers going forth?
It's funny you asked me that, because I just did an interview with Inside Higher Education. We spent a lot of time on that question. 3 years ago, even 4 years ago, I would have said, the landscape, the marketplace will survive. It'll be slightly changed, but it'll survive. I'm a lot more concerned now from what I'm seeing. The small privates, Cabrini just yesterday, Cabrini put out a call for merger yesterday. I think financially a lot, unless they're well endowed, okay, the small privates I think are seriously, some of them are in serious trouble. And one of the things, to put this in perspective, one of the things even the public institutions in New Jersey have done for those folks, and this is, we have actually lobbied on behalf of the small privates because we believe they make it, like you said, Michael, they can make a very important contribution to the overall higher education landscape. There's something like 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States. Clearly, we could do with fewer than them. I don't think there's any question about that. But given the cost to stay, number one, the maintenance of our buildings, which when you see the kind of rampant inflation that's going on now, so what it took to fix a sidewalk 4 years ago, it's going to take a lot more now. And if you don't have that, so everything from all your capital improvements to the cost of the technology is not inexpensive. So the cost of the technology, all the costs associated with it. And if you don't, there's a limit to how much we can raise tuition and fees before you get the kind of incredible pushback that we're getting now. So I think if your revenue base has to be more modest in growth than your cost base, by definition, you'd have a structural deficit unless you can make it up philanthropically or get larger, if you're public, larger appropriations. And I'm not seeing that because there's a loss of confidence in higher ed by the general public, which is what you're hearing more about, and they're not as willing to invest as they once were. And as a result, that causes shifts in the marketplace. And that's one of the reasons why when I talked about what you should look about in the future are these kinds of things and how do we navigate that kind of a landscape. And so I do see more mergers. I'm hoping it's mergers and not closures, because closures are just traumatic to the student and the faculty and staff who, particularly your tenured faculty and staff have given their lives to their institutions. They don't want to even hear that concept. But so I'm hoping there are more mergers. The problem is when you and I'm looking towards the Montclair Bloomfield experiment, because when you look at a public institution overtaking basically a private institution, they have different unions, they have different pensions, they have different healthcare plans. There's a lot of things that have to be worked out to make it work, and it needs a lot of compromise and a lot of collaboration that we're not that used to doing because unfortunately we're competitive for students, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we had COVID helped there though. COVID forced us all to work together to come up with joint solutions. And one of the things that I noticed in our state was the cooperation between and among the presidents. Not only the presidents, we always are usually reasonably cooperative because we share the miseries of the same positions. But below us, our provost met more, our VPs for admin and finance met more, all the key human resources people met more, all the key administrators met more statewide because we were all in the same unknowing position. And I worry so we can take what we learned from there to apply to what we haven't yet confronted, but it does not it looks worrisome, quite frankly. I'm an external optimist, which is why I'm saying, I hope it's mergers and acquisitions, so to speak.
Let me ask you one other thing, if I may. We have some extra time here again because one person got sick. Higher education is having a problem with enrollments. Certainly, better than me. What we're seeing, I think, is low birth rates. 18, 20 years ago, so there's not as many high school graduates. I also think we're seeing a reduction in the percent of high school graduates that go on to college. And I think there's been a perception, at least in the last couple of years, that maybe a college degree is not worth what we thought it was worth. And there's people going out and avoiding college. What do you think about that going forward in the future?
Well, there is that perception. I mean, that's the whole thing about the return on investment. I mean, there are now journals, magazines, and the like that's what they feature. What's the ROI? You could look it up. You go right online to say Stockton's ROI, and you'll see 4 or 5 different entities that will give you their assessment of that. So yeah, I do think that there's questions concerning the return on investment, particularly when people see costs of $50,000 and $60,000, and you're talking $60,000 a year, even though they ultimately don't play that. There's the posted price, the sticker price versus the real price. But for students who are not, who are first gen, who are underrepresented groups, they don't sometimes realize, because they're not having people, assisting them in their house who had never gone to college. They see that figure, they say, why should I do that? I can't afford that. That's more than my household makes. And so there is a real potential crisis, and we are losing, the traditional 18 to 22-year-old because of the demographics, not in every area of the United States or the world, but certainly in certain portions of the United States, you certainly see it. We happen to be in one of those portions. Now, there are other ways to make that up. One of the ways is, try to get other markets, whether it's what's now called the non-traditional, which has become more traditional student, the older student who wants to come back, get a degree, who needs to change their career because their whole economy, their whole profession may be outdated and the like. So there are other ways, utilizing online to reach further markets and things of that nature, and to do things, creative things. One of the things a lot of colleges and universities are doing now, and we certainly have been doing it, and that is have what we call dual credit programs with high schools. Start in the high school, get students to see the advantages of attending college in high school. So they get ahead, so it's more cost effective for them. They know they can succeed, and they're on their way while they're still graduating high school and this could go to any high school, can make this work. So I think it's to continually try to get more students in the pipeline and a higher percentage of students in the pipeline. We're losing males, quite frankly, at dramatic rates, not just, African-American or Latino male, but all males at a higher rate than we ever had in the past. The college going rate for males have actually begun to decline, where it's not the case for women. And so women are consistently, coming in, they graduate at high rates, they attend high school at higher rates, graduate high school at higher rates, go to college at higher rates, and are more successful when they're in college. That down the road is something that we need to look at from a societal point of view to address partially what you just brought up.
Yeah, I think the last figures I saw, and again, you know more about this than I do, but I think roughly enrollments, I think at Stockton and nationwide, are a little over 60% female and probably a little under 40% male.
Right, absolutely, and climbing, and the women category climbing. There's no question about that, and you're seeing that, and that affects all, the whole pipeline. It also it affects down the road the job market and everything associated. So where are these males who are not going to college? Where are they going? And if we don't provide that an option, for those males, you get anger. Okay, you get anger because here they've been told this is what's going to happen, and they're latched out of, quote, and I'm being very provincial, from the American dream. And if they're latched out of that, okay, what's their option? So, and you see what's happening in our society. So I think it's important that we look at the trades. I think, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, they're great careers. I mean, they really are high-paying careers. And we need to do something for those who want an option other than college, who are worried about paying for college, to be able to, be part of the old, apprenticeship system. But we can't lose the underrepresented population, because that's the only growing demographic in the United States. And that's the underrepresented populations in the United States. And we must make sure that those groups of students, potential students, have an option for higher education. And we're doing everything we can to get them to graduate high school and come into higher education. If we fail to do that, then you will see how doomed we really are. If we are successful, which I have every reason to believe we will be and can be, I think you can see the tide begin to turn.
And of course, that presents a whole lot of challenges, new challenges, trying to reach out to people who maybe didn't consider going back to college, or maybe they did, they just didn't know how to do it. And, what kind of credits will be accepted, what what do I have to do? I've been out of school for 10 years. So I think too, the universities are going to have to get more innovative in how they admit these students, get them in, and even in the delivery system. You mentioned the use of online. I think for those students that may be of a particular benefit.
Yeah, and prior learning assessment. I mean, we need to look at people's prior learning and see if we can somehow, you know, prepare. You're talking about situations where you want students to show instant success, okay? And if once you know, success breeds success. It's momentum. We know that. So if we can. That's why I said get down into the high schools if we can do it. If we can do that and get students who have been exposed to this and say, oh, I can actually do this work, and I can see the benefit of doing this work. And you folks, I can't overstate. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to put it back on the faculty, of which I will be, once I retire, I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back to the faculty. So I'm with you on this. You make a difference in the lives of our students. When they connect with you, when they see you and they get to learn from you the kinds of opportunities that they can have. And you don't have to program in any field, you know, you want to show them that it's about the educational experience, about what you learn, how you can present ideas and the like, how you write, how you communicate. All of those skills are the skills people really look for ultimately long-term. And you're the ones who are best at equipping them with those skills so that they can then recognize, I can do it. And once we do that, then, you know, I think that's why we do this. That's our calling. That's what, you know, Socrates and Plato and Aristotle was talking about. Okay, Beverly. And so I think it's critically important that that's what all of you and all of us try to do. Never forget, you know, all the buildings are wonderful, but when push comes to shove, we are in the teaching, learning business. That's what we're in. The transfer of knowledge from our generation to the next generation and the creation of new knowledge by combining those.
That was exceptionally well done, Harvey. There was a lot of great points you pointed out. This conference is about innovation and entrepreneurship. I think what you're saying is universities have to be able to innovate too, and maybe even take on that entrepreneurial way of thinking to try to succeed going into the future.
Absolutely. Well stated, Michael. Good to see you all. I have to go to another meeting.
All right, we're good. We're going to move on here. We have just 1 minute left. If anybody wants to add anything. Okay. Good, then. I guess we're just about done here. I think we have one minute. So I guess we'll sign off on this one and we'll move right on to.
Yes, hi, Paul. How are you?
Oh, here comes Sanadi. She'll fix everything. Sanadi? Okay. I thought that was Sanadi. Okay. It is just about 11 o'clock, so I guess we're moving on. That's Eastern Standard Time on the US. I know everybody's in a whole different time zones. I think what we do now is move on to the next roundtable. Somebody shake their head, yes. Beverly?
It's mine.
Oh, okay.
I chair this session.
You chair this session, okay. Then I'm going to stop talking and let you take over.